All praises, all praises, all praises to the heavenly creator of infinity, eternity, the universe, the stars, the earth, the oceans, the mountains, the seas, all creeping things, humanity, and all there is. This is Revelations.Unveiled. Detroit. Good evening, family. Back to you again to make presentation in humility, in honor, with privilege and pleasure to be with you so that we can share, clarify, build on our understandings of our identities, our holy history as it is infused with the global history. And we are back again this evening to continue our exploration and review of them, the so-called Jewish people. And again, I offer my thanks and appreciation to Brother Harvey over at the channel Your World, Your View, for a commentary he posed some days ago that precipitated me in the spirit to bring forth this information. So we will continue from the second episode. And I will say, as a viewer of that episode, it was powerful to me. So I'm not sure if that's a subjective statement or an objective statement, but I was affected from that last course of information. So we will be starting tonight at a biblical reference of these people, and then we're going to bring that all the way through history up to the year of 1866. So I hope my historian brothers and sisters out there have their ears peaked. I hope they are ready to grasp these terms, locations, designations, and time frames and events. So I begin by sending out my love and continuous blessings of care in prayer for the 12 tribes scattered abroad, wherever you may be or sojourn upon this earth. And to my brothers and sisters who refer to themselves as the melanated and Moors, the sojourners and sovereigns, the original man and children of God, the copper-colored, the colored, and the people of color, the indigenous and aboriginals, the natives, Negroes and niggas, the Afro and African Americans and blacks, the descendants of slaves, and those conquered and colonized. Oh yes, family, we are here at or in the den at Revelations.Unveiled. Detroit, and we shall begin with the continuation of them. And we start with our standard at our channel of Revelations.Unveiled. Detroit over in the book of Malachi, chapter 3, verse 6. For I am the Lord, I change not. Therefore, you sons of Jacob are not consumed. And we follow that standard up in the book of Hebrews, chapter 13, verse 8, in reference to the anointed Messiah, the Redeemer, the Savior, the King of Israel, whom the world refers to as Jesus Christ, the same yesterday and today and forever. All right, family. So if you're new to this channel, those are our sword and shield of the doctrine of the Israelites, of the 12 tribes That is our standard of the covenant. So we begin at a historical reference at Wikipedia, however it's pronounced. So this is just going to be an introduction on the basic lines to get us started. And just as a recap, in the previous episodes, we were introduced to some terms of KHAZARs, Ashkenazi, KHAZARIA, the family of the Rothschilds, Mazzini, Giuseppe, the Schiff family, Albert Pike, the term Illuminati, the term Freemasonry, the term Talmudism, which is modern day Judaism, the secret world conspiracy. So we will be starting at where we, as the children of Israel, left out of Egypt, and we will proceed all the way through history to when we were formally, quote unquote, physically released as a people or nation here in New Egypt or America or Sodom in 1866. And we begin with the term Amalek. Amalek is a nation described in the Hebrew Bible. The name Amalek can refer to the nation's founder, the grandson of Esau. His descendants, the Amalekites, or the territories of Amalek, which they inhabited. The Hebrew Bible describes the Amalekites as a tribe which lived in ancient Israel and in the land of Moab, in what the Romans called Arabia, Petraea, Moab, and the desert of Sinai, a region depopulated in the 14th century BC and then occupied by Edomites. According to the book of Genesis and First Chronicles, Amalek was the son of Eliphaz and the concubine of Timnah. Timnah was a Horite and sister of Lotan. Amalek appears in the genealogy of Esau, who was the chief of an Edomite tribe. Amalek is described as the chief of Amalek, in which it is surmised that he ruled a clan or territory named after him. In the chant of Balaam at Numbers 24:20, Amalek was called the first of the nations, attesting to high antiquity. Rashi states he came before all of them that make war with Israel. First century Roman Jewish scholar and historian Flavius Josephus refers to Amalek as a bastard in a derogatory sense. According to the Hebrew Bible, the Amalekites inhabited the Negev. They are commonly considered to be Amalek's descendants through the genealogy of Esau. This is probably based on the association of this tribal group with the steppe region of ancient Israel and the area of Kadesh. As a people, the Amalekites were identified as a recurrent enemy of the Israelites. All right, and we continue. The Israelite view of the Amalekites. In the Israelite history, the Amalekites came to represent the archetypal enemy of the Israelites. In Jewish folklore, the Amalekites are considered to be the symbol of evil. This concept has been used by some Hasidic rabbis, particularly the Baal Shem Tov, to represent atheism or the rejection of God. Ner Masala, Elliot Horowitz, and Joseph Stern suggest that Amalekites have come to represent an internal, irreconcilable enemy that wants to murder Israelites, and that the Israelites in post-biblical times sometimes associate contemporary enemies with Haman or Amalekites, and that some Jews believe that preemptive violence is accepted against these enemies. Groups identified with Amalek include the Romans, Nazis, Stalinists, and bellicose Iranian leaders such as Mahmoud Ahmadinejad. During the Purim festival, the book of Esther is read in commemoration of the saving of the Israelites from Haman, considered to be an Amalekite, who led a plot to kill the Israelites on the basis of Exodus 17:14, where the Lord promised to blot out the name of Amalek. It is customary for the audience to make noise and shout whenever Haman is mentioned in order to desecrate his name. It is customary to recite Deuteronomy 25:17 through 18 on the Shabbat, the holy Sabbath, right before Purim. All right, and we move on. So now we know about the tribe of Amalek, a grandson of Esau, an eternal, recurrent enemy to the true Israelites, the 12 tribes. And we continue. An introduction to the KHAZAR people, a history of KHAZARIA. Origins. The KHAZARs were a Turkic people who originated in Central Asia. The early Turkic tribes were quite diverse, although it is believed that reddish hair was predominant among them prior to the Mongol conquest. In the beginning, the KHAZARs believed in Tengri shamanism, spoke a Turkic language, and were nomadic. Later, the KHAZARs adopted Judaism, Islam, and Christianity, learned Hebrew and Slavic, and became settled in cities and towns throughout the North Caucasus and Ukraine. The KHAZARs had a great history of ethnic independence extending approximately 800 years from the 5th to the 13th century. The earliest history of the KHAZARs in southern Russia prior to the middle of the 6th century is hidden in obscurity. From about 550 to 630, the KHAZARs were part of the Western Turkish Empire, ruled by the Celestial Blue Turks. When the Western Turkish Empire was broken up as a result of civil wars in the middle of the 7th century, the KHAZARs successfully asserted their independence. Yet the Khaganate, under which they had lived, provided the KHAZARs with their system of government. For example, the KHAZARs followed the same guidelines as the Kok Turks regarding the succession of kings. And we continue. The decline and fall of KHAZARIA. During the 10th century, the East Slavs were united under Scandinavian overlordship. A new nation, Kievan Rus, was formed by Prince Oleg, just as the KHAZARs had left their mark on other peoples. So too did they influence the Rus. The Rus and the Hungarians both adopted the dual kingship system of the KHAZARs. The Rus princes even borrowed the title Kagan. Archaeologists recovered a variety of KHAZAR or KHAZAR-styled objects, including clothing and pottery, from Viking grave sites in Chernigov, Gnezdovo, Kiev, and even Burka, Sweden. The residents of Kievan Rus patterned their legal procedures after the KHAZARs. In addition, some KHAZAR words became part of the Old East Slavic language. For example, Bokatir, brave knight, apparently. The Rush inherited most of the former KHAZAR lands in the late 10th century and early 11th century. One of the most devastating defeats came in 965 when Rus Prince Sevastopol conquered the KHAZAR fortress of Sarkel. It is believed that he conquered Itil 2 years later, after which he campaigned in the Balkans. Despite the loss of their nation, the KHAZAR people did not disappear. Many of them converted to Islam and survived in the North Caucasus and Central Asia regions under new identities. Others lived and studied in other Jewish communities from Spain to the Byzantine Empire, but in the end had no impact on the ancestral composition of any modern Israelite population. And we continue over again with another reference. Genetic roots of the Ashkenazi Jews. Most Ashkenazi Jews traditionally believed to have descended from the ancient tribes of Israel, may in fact be maternally descended from prehistoric Europeans. The majority of Ashkenazi Jews are descended from prehistoric European women, according to study published today, October 8. Unknown year, so I'll have to fill that in later. In Nature Communications. While the Jewish religion began in the Near East and the Ashkenazis, Jews were believed to have origins in the early indigenous tribes of the region. New evidence from mitochondrial DNA, which is passed on exclusively from mother to child, suggests that female ancestors of most modern Ashkenazi Jews converted to Judaism in the North Mediterranean around 2,000 years ago and later in West and Central Europe. And now we take reference from author Kostler, the writer of the book, The 13th Tribe. The 13th Tribe is a 1976 book by Arthur Kostler, in which the author advances the thesis that Ashkenazi Jews are not descended from the historical Israelites of antiquity, but from KHAZARs, a Turkic people. Kostler hypothesized that the KHAZARs who converted to Judaism in the 8th century migrated westwards into Eastern Europe in the 12th and 13th centuries when the KHAZAR Empire was collapsing. Kostler used previous works by Douglas Morton Dunlap, Raphael Patai, and Abraham Pollock as sources. His stated intent was to make anti-Semitism disappear by disproving its racial basis. In the book, Kostler advances the thesis that Ashkenazi Jews are not descended from the historical Israelites of antiquity, but from the KHAZARs. At the end of the book's last chapter, Kostler summarizes its contents and his intentions as follows. In part 1 of this book, I have attempted to trace the history of the KHAZAR Empire based on the scant existing sources. In part 2, chapters 5 through 7, I have compiled the historical evidence which indicates that the bulk of the Eastern Jewry, and hence world Jewry, is of KHAZAR Turkish rather than Semitic origin. In the last chapter, I've tried to show that the evidence from the anthropology concurs with history in refuting the popular belief in a Jewish race descended from the biblical tribe. Koestler's reasons for writing it. Koestler biographer Michael Scamel writes that Koestler told French biologist Pierre de Bray-Ritson he was convinced that if he could prove the bulk of Eastern European Jews, the ancestors of today's Ashkenazim, were descended from KHAZARs, the racial basis for anti-Semitism would be removed, and anti-Semitism itself could disappear. According to George Urban, Koestler's desire to connect Ashkenazi Jews with KHAZARs was based on a tacit belief that the intellectual brilliance of an international influence of Hungarians and Jews, especially Hungarian Jews or Jewish Hungarians, was due to some unexplained, clearly ancient affinity between the two peoples. All right. So Arthur Koestler wrote a whole book, The 13th Tribe, to outline the history of the Jewish Ashkenazi Khazarian people. And now I interject with a spiritual set of verses over in the book of Matthew, chapter 4, verse 1. Then was the anointed Messiah led up of the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil. And when he had fasted 40 days and 40 nights, he was afterward and hungered. And when the tempter came to him, he said, if you be the Son of God, command that these stones be made bread. Verse 4. But he answered and said, it is written, man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceedeth out of the mouth of God. Verse 8. Again, the devil took him up into an exceeding high mountain and showed him all the kingdoms of the world and the glory of them. Verse 9. And said unto him, all these things will I give you if you will fall down and worship me. Verse 10. Then saith the anointed Messiah unto him, get you behind me, Satan, for it is written, you shall worship the Lord your God, and him only shall you serve. So the question is, when the devil made that offer to a nation of people to give them all the kingdoms of the world and glory, who took the deal? And now, family, we get to our historical timeline, and we will start dropping historical tidbits to bring us into a total consensus of our spirit and our carnal existence. We start at the year 1776. The Declaration of Independence declares that all men are created equal. Start over. The Declaration of Independence declares that all men are created equal. In spite of that, slavery remains a legal institution in all 13 of the newly established states. Adam Weishaupt officially completes the origination of the Illuminati on May 1 of this year. The purpose of the Illuminati is to divide the Goyim, all non-Jews, through political, economic, social, and religious means. The opposing sides were to be armed, and incidents were to be provided in order for them to fight among themselves, destroy national governments, destroy religious institutions, and eventually destroy each other. 1784. Adam Weishaupt issues orders for French Revolution to be started by the Maximilien Robespierre in book form. The book was written by one of Weishaupt's associates, Xavier Zwack, and sent by courier from Frankfurt to Paris. However, en route, the courier is struck by lightning. The book detailing this plan, discovered by police and handed over to the Bavarian authorities. As a consequence, the Bavarian government orders the police to raid Weishaupt's Masonic lodges of the Grand Orient and the homes of his most influential associates. Clearly, the Bavarian authorities were convinced that the book that was discovered was a very real threat by a private group of influential people to use wars and revolutions to achieve their political ends. Nathan Mayer Rothschild is born. And we are now in the year 1790. Mayer Amschel Rothschild states, "Let me issue and control a nation's money, and I care not who writes the laws." 1791. The Rothschilds get control of a nation's money through Alexander Hamilton, their agent in George Washington's cabinet, when they set up a central bank in the U.S. called the First Bank of the United States. This is established with a 20-year charter. All right, family, and we are now at year 1798. John Robinson publishes a book entitled Proofs of a Conspiracy Against All Religions and Governments of Europe, carried on in secret meetings of Freemasons, Illuminati, and reading societies. In this book, Professor Robinson of the University of Edinburgh, one of the leading intellects of his time, who in 1783 was elected General Secretary of the Royal Society of Edinburgh, gave details of the whole Rothschild Illuminati plot. He advised how he had been a high-degree Mason in the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry and had been invited by Adam Weishaupt to Europe, where he had been given a revised copy of Weishaupt's conspiracy. However, although he pretended to go along with it, Professor Robinson did not agree with it and therefore published his aforementioned book. The book included details of the Bavarian government's investigation into the Illuminati and the French Revolution. The same year, on July 19th, David Papin, president of Harvard University, lectured the graduating class on the influence of Illuminism was having on the American politics and religions. At the age of 21, Nathan Mayer Rothschild leaves Frankfurt for England, where with a large sum of money given to him by his father, he sets up a banking house in London. Year 1811. The charter for the Rothschilds Bank of the United States runs out and Congress votes against its renewal. Nathan Mayer Rothschild is not amused and states, either the application for renewal of the charter is granted or the United States will find itself involved in a most disastrous war. However, the United States stands firm and the charter is not renewed, which causes Nathan Mayer Rothschild to issue another threat. Teach those impudent Americans a lesson. Bring them back to colonial status. 1812. Backed by the Rothschilds' money and Nathan Mayer Rothschild's orders, the British declare war on the United States. The Rothschilds' plan was to cause the United States to build up such a debt in fighting this war that they would have to surrender to the Rothschilds and allow the charter for the Rothschild-owned First Bank of the United States to be renewed. Mayer Amschel Rothschild dies. In his will, he lays out specific laws that the house of the Rothschilds were to follow. All key positions in the family business were only to be held by family members. Only male members of the family were allowed to participate in the family business. This included a reported sixth secret bastard child. It is important to note that Mayer Amschel Rothschild also has 5 daughters. So today, the spread of the Rothschild Zionist dynasty without the Rothschild name is far and wide, and Jews believe the mixed offspring of a Jewish mother is solely Jewish. The year 1815. The 5 Rothschild brothers worked to supply gold to both Wellington's army through Nathan in England and Napoleon's army through Jacob in France, and begin their policy of funding both sides in wars. The Rothschilds love wars because they are massive generators of risk-free debt. Back in 1815, this is the year England. This is the year Nathan Mayer Rothschild makes his famous statement, "I care not what puppet is placed upon the throne of England to rule the empire on which the sun never sets. The man who controls Britain's money supply controls the British Empire, and I control the British money supply." He would go on to brag that in the 17 years he had been in England, he had increased the $20,000 stake given to him by his father 2,500 times to 50 million. The Rothschilds also used their control of the Bank of England to replace the method of shipping gold from country to country, and instead used their 5 banks spread across Europe to set up a system of paper debits and credits, the banking system of today. Year 1818. Following the French securing massive loans in 1817 in order to help rebuild after disastrous defeat at Waterloo, Rothschild agents bought vast amounts of French government bonds, causing their value to increase. On November 5th, they dumped the lot on the open market, causing their value to plummet and France to go into financial panic. The Rothschilds then stepped in to take control of the French money supply. This was the same year the Rothschilds were able to loan $5 million to the Prussian government. Continuing to move through history, family. 1821, Karl Mayer Rothschild was sent to Naples, Italy. He would end up doing a lot of business with the Vatican, and Pope Gregory the 16th subsequently conferred upon him the Order of St. George. 1823, the Rothschilds take over the financial operations of the Catholic Church worldwide. 1827, Sir Walter Scott publishes his 9-volume set, The Life of Napoleon, and in Volume 2, he states that the French Revolution was planned by the Illuminati, Adam Weishaupt, and was financed by the money changers of Europe, the Rothschilds. 1833, President Andrew Jackson starts removing the government's deposits from the Rothschild-controlled Second Bank of the United States and instead deposits them into the banks directed by Democratic bankers. This causes the Rothschilds to panic, and so they do what they do best: contract the money supply, causing a depression. President Jackson knows what they are up to and later states, "You are a den of thieves and vipers, and I intend to rout you out. And by the eternal God, I will rout you out." 1834, the Italian revolutionary leader Giuseppe Mazzini is selected by the Illuminati to direct their revolutionary program throughout the world and would serve in that capacity until he died in 1872. 1844, Salomon Mayer Rothschild purchases the United Coal Mines in Vikofis, an Austro-Hungarian blast furnace company that would go on to be one of the top 10 global industrial concerns. Benjamin Disraeli, an Ashkenazi Jew who would go on to become Prime Minister of Britain twice, the only admitted Ashkenazi to do so, publishes Coningsby, in which he characterizes Nathan Mayer Rothschild as the Lord and Master of the money markets of the world, and of course, virtually Lord and Master of everything else. He literally held the revenues of southern Italy in pawn, and monarchs and ministers of all countries courted his advice and were guided by his suggestions. 1847. 1848. Karl Marx, an Ashkenazi Jew, publishes the Communist Manifesto. Interestingly, at the same time as he was working on this, Carl Ritter of Frankfurt University was writing the antithesis, which would form the basis for Friedrich Wilhelm Nietzsche's Nietzscheanism. This Nietzscheanism was later developed into fascism and then into Nazism, and was used to foment the First and Second World Wars. Marx, Ritter, and Nietzsche were all funded and under the instruction of the Rothschilds. The idea was that those who direct the overall conspiracy could use the differences in those two so-called ideologies to enable them to divide larger and larger factions of the human race into opposing camps so that they could be armed and then brainwashed into fighting and destroying each other, and particularly to destroy all political and religious institutions. That same plan put forward by Weishaupt in 1776. All right, family. And now we are at the year 1863. President Lincoln issues the Emancipation Proclamation, declaring that all persons held as slaves within the Confederate States are and henceforward shall be free. 1865. The Civil War ends. Lincoln is assassinated. The 13th Amendment abolishes slavery throughout the United States. On June 19, slavery in the United States effectively ended when 250,000 slaves in Texas finally received the news that the Civil War had ended 2 months earlier. 1866. Enacted by Congress over President Andrew Johnson's veto, the Civil Rights Act of 1866 aimed to counter black codes enacted by Southern states by validating the citizenship of former slaves and endowing them with specific federally guaranteed civil rights. The 13th Amendment, which abolished slavery in the United States of America, became law on December 18, 1866, when Secretary of State William Seward verified that 3/4 of the states had ratified the proposal to amend the Constitution. Southern states responded to the new amendments by enacting black codes aimed at oppressing newly emancipated slaves left to the caprice of state governments. Blacks failed to attain the ordinary civil liberties of whites. The black codes are passed by all white legislators of the former Confederate states. Congress passes the Civil Rights Act, conferring citizenship on African Americans and granting them equal rights to whites. The Ku Klux Klan is formed in Tennessee. All right, family. So that is the end of this part of our review of them. And as you see, it is intermingled with us. All of the history that started in 1776 up until 1865, family, You were spiritually asleep in bondage, captivity, slavery. A whole satanic, wicked global conspiracy is surrounding the children of Israel as we sit, stand, and lay and listen to this presentation. The children of the covenant are besieged by a spiritual plan by the so-called Illuminati, financed by the Rothschilds, which control all of the money on earth through their central banks and Federal Reserve. Those people took the deal that the Messiah rejected. That is why in the book of Revelations, chapter 2, verse 9, it lets you know from the Holy Messiah's own mouth, red letter, the book of Revelations, chapter 2, verse 9. I know your works and tribulation and poverty, but you are rich. And I know the blasphemy of them which say they are Jews and are not, but are the synagogue of Satan. That is who they are. That is them. The Amalekite, KHAZARian, Ashkenazi, Jewish people who have claimed our identity, are treading upon our homeland, in control of the world's money, media, music, and printing. So, the man, the son of perdition, the man of sin, who uses all the power of Satan with his lying wonders and signs, has the whole world believing they are the chosen people. They are the chosen people of the synagogue of Satan. And so, family, again, Lord willing, I will return and I will continue to poke you in your spiritual eye. We will start from 1866 and show you how the First World War was set up and the setup for the Second World War. All the history you thought you knew and believed about those people in the World's War, we will show you the lie. Family, until we are together again, I love you. I love you. Family, I love you. This is Revelations.Unveiled.Detroit. The book of Deuteronomy, chapter 7, verses 6 through 9. For we are a holy people unto the Lord our God. The Lord our God has chosen us to be a special people unto himself, above all people that are upon the face of the earth. The Lord did not set his love upon us, nor choose us, because we were more in number than any people. For we were the fewest of all people. But because the Lord loved us, and because he would keep the oath which he had sworn to our fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, has the Lord brought us out with a mighty hand and redeemed us out of the house of bondmen, from the hand of Pharaoh, king of Egypt. Verse 9. Know therefore that the Lord our God, he is God, the faithful God, which keeps covenant and mercy with them that love him and keep his commandments to 1,000 generations. And to the scattered tribes, here is your promise of comfort. Book of John, chapter 3, verses 14 through 17, into Isaiah, chapter 45, verse 17. And as Moses lifted up the serpent in the wilderness, even so must the Son of Man be lifted up, that whosoever believeth in him should not perish, but have eternal life. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him should not perish, but have everlasting life. Verse 17, for God sent not his Son into the world to condemn the world, but that the world through him might be saved. Isaiah 45:17. But Israel shall be saved in the Lord with an everlasting salvation. You shall not be ashamed nor confounded. World without end.